webinar on DLR job services essential for your workplace success. I'm Katie Sieverding, Government Relations Coordinator for the South Dakota Retailers Association. First, I'd like to share some information on our association. The South Dakota Retailers Association is a 3,900 member statewide association. Our primary mission is to represent retailers in the legislative and regulatory process. In addition, we provide information, offer training for food service and alcohol licensees, and provide member services. Those services include credit card processing, business insurance, and data security. We also have an agreement with a labor law firm that allows our members to get answers to employment law questions from an attorney. Next, I'd like to introduce our presenter. Today's webinar will feature a presentation by Marcia Hultman, the Secretary of the South Dakota Department of Labor and Regulation. She has been a part of the DLR team since June of 1997, serving as Public Information Officer, then Workforce Services Director in 2000, and a joint role as Director and Deputy Secretary starting in 2006. Secretary Hultman chairs the Unemployment Insurance Advisory Council, serves on the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council, Workforce Development Council, and the DOL Retirement Board. She is a graduate of Black Hills State University. A few things before we start the presentation. The phones of all attendees are muted, so we won't be hearing any background noises. We'll have a question and answer period at the conclusion of the presentation. If you would like to ask a question at any time, just go to the panel on the side of your screen. You may need to click on the orange arrow to maximize that panel. Type your message in the chat box and click on send. At the conclusion of the presentation, I'll read the questions out loud and Secretary Hultman will provide the answers. The slides for today's presentation can be viewed and or printed by clicking on the links under the handouts panel on the side of your screen. We'll now turn the presentation over to Secretary Hultman.
Thank you, Katie, and good morning to everyone that has joined us for this webinar. I would like to thank the Retailers Association for the opportunity to share some information about the department and some activities that we're currently engaged in this morning. So a big thanks to Sean and to Donna and to Katie for allowing me to visit with you this morning. The whole background premise of this presentation is to let you know that you're not in the workforce development game alone. The Department of Labor and Regulation continues to seek out solutions on a daily basis to business needs. We've had our ear to the ground to hear what works and what doesn't, and we really look to communities and businesses to provide us some feedback to help evolve the programs that we're involved in. So this presentation is designed to highlight some of the services that we have within the department, really specific to retention and recruitment, and to share with you some exciting news about our new SDWORKS system, which is our job database, and recruitment efforts such as Dakota Roots. So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I'll go ahead and get started on my first slide. So when I'm out in communities or visiting with others in the state, one of the main things I hear from employers is they're really struggling to find skilled workers for the openings that have in their businesses. And it's a great challenge to have, but it's a challenge nonetheless. We hear from a lot of businesses that are poised for growth, but to be able to grow, they have to have the right skill sets and the right people in their positions. So this slide that's in front of you this morning is to just provide some data that will reinforce what many of you probably know to be true. So rather than just giving you anecdotal evidence, I wanted to share with you some of the statistics. The first one is our unemployment rate, and I think it's not news to anyone that we're often have the lowest unemployment rate in the nation. Our unemployment rate for the month of May was 2.9%, and we actually weren't the lowest that particular month. We were 4th in the nation, but again, we're really consistently, if not 1 or 2 or 3, right there at the top. I do want to focus just for one quick second on what the unemployment rate means and what it does not mean. The unemployment rate is not a measure of everyone that doesn't have a job in the state. Rather, it is a measure of those that have recently separated from their jobs, are actively seeking work, and are available to work. And that's a definition that is used across the nation, and the methodology to determine that rate is used consistently by all the states. So it is one number that shows those individuals that are available and looking for work but not employed at this time. There's another category, which is discouraged workers, and those individuals have not been seeking work recently but would fall in the available for work category. So sometimes I think people look at that number and don't feel that it really acknowledges or accounts for everybody that's not in the workforce, and I just want to reinforce that that's not the intention of that particular number. It is also not tied to the number of people that receive unemployment insurance benefits, as not everyone who is unemployed qualifies to receive that benefit. The next number on the slide is a new way to look at the problem that many of us have witnessed in the workforce. And this is a good old-fashioned ratio. And what it does is it compares the number of unemployed that we have currently in a snapshot in time to the number of job openings that we have. So simply what that means, if I had that complete ratio in front of you, we had 13,422 unemployed individuals in April, and we had 39,172 job openings listed for that entire month. So if you do that as a ratio, it means basically that we had a third of a person for every job opening, which really illustrates the challenge that employers are facing, because obviously a third of a person is not enough, and there's no guarantee that that person has the skill sets or is in the right place or the right time or has the desires to fill the positions. So again, it's just another number that quantifies that we need every citizen in our state to be fully skilled, to be engaged in our workforce, and anything that we can do to help individuals reach that goal is going to help all of us succeed. Another number that I want to share with you is that 14,965, and that's the total current jobs that we had available on our website as of June 15th. This number I'm going to come back and talk to you a little bit more about later on in the presentation when I discuss our new SDWORKS system that was just launched in early April. But this is the number of job postings that employers have listed with us on the Department of Labor and Regulation job seeker job posting exchange site. And I always refer to this as the kind of monster.jobs or for South Dakota. So these are South Dakota specific jobs, and it allows seekers to see what we have available and to apply for jobs. I sometimes, when I'm watching the news late at night, I'll see other job websites in the state post that, you know, they're the most comprehensive or they have the most job openings, and I always get a little bit defensive because this really is the most comprehensive website, has the largest number of openings available, and it is the site that we look to as decision makers, policy makers in the state to help verify where the needs and the demands are. So that's always kind of my little plug to employers. If you're not listing your jobs with us, make sure that you do so, as it gives us better data moving forward as we're looking at training programs or where needs and demands are. The next numbers are going to tell you, again, numerically, something that you probably already know to be true about South Dakotans. We are workers. We hear a lot about the good old South Dakota work ethic, and I can tell you it's not a myth. It is definitely a reality. The first number illustrates that by showing that 68.1% of those of us that are over the age of 16 are in the workforce. And there's no cutoff on that. So that 68.1% is from 16 until death, if you decide to stay in the workforce until your last breath. And that puts us at the 5th highest in the nation. And we're typically, again, we rank very high in the number of our citizens who are actively engaged in the workforce. The national average for that same participation rate 16 and over is 63.1%. And it's a lot of the Midwest states that have the rates higher than us. North Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota all have slightly higher participation rates than South Dakota does. The lowest states are West Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, and Kentucky, with the very lowest rate being 52.8%. So almost a full, well, more than a full 10 points difference in our rate when compared to theirs. So that says we are working. We're engaged in the workforce. The next number is something that I'm going to reference in a little bit different ways throughout my presentation, because I think this number is really key to helping us solve our workforce challenges. And that number references the number of teenagers that are engaged in the workforce. And the 16 to 19-year-olds, our youth participation rate, as this is referred to, is currently 50.5%. And the reason I want to focus on this a little bit is this is a number that has been declining in recent years. And if we were all in a room together, I would have you, by show of hands, how many of you had your first job and at what age? And really typical in South Dakota, many of us would raise our hands and say, we had our first job at 14. Or if we're farm kids, even earlier than that. But that's not true for kids today. Kids are not entering the workforce as early as they used to, and that youth participation rate in South Dakota and in the nation is declining. Many times that's tied to the economy. In times of a recession, youth will be pushed out of the workforce by adults who need those jobs, but that's not the case right now. We're in recovery, not currently in a recession, and yet we see that number declining. So that is a contradiction to what has happened historically. One study that I found yesterday, and I've not been able to verify this for South Dakota numbers, but it gave an employment rate for those in high school, so it defined it even more narrowly and said that the youth participation rate nationwide for those in high school was only 18%. So again, a much lower number when you take those 19-year-olds out of the equation. And again, our youth participation rate is considerably higher than the rest of the nation, but declining. So with that, I just wanted to, and I can't forget the multiple job holders. So this is a number, again, that illustrates what hard workers we are in South Dakota. And we are at 9.1% of individuals in the state that have 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs. And we are, again, #1 in the nation for the most multiple job holders. We are followed by Iowa at 8.6 and Maine at 8.2. And the national average is actually only 4.9. So what does this tell me about South Dakota? It's just the data that supports. We're engaged in the workforce. Many of us have multiple jobs. We're hard workers, and we're really maximizing to the fullest capacity the workforce that we do have at the current time. I also read a study last week that many of you maybe caught in the newspaper, and it talked about how, unfortunately, South Dakotans are also the least likely to utilize their vacation leave. So if you guys have any built up, I'm just encouraging you to take advantage of it and not let that accumulate too much, so you'll come back refreshed and ready to go. So having set the stage and talked about some of the data, I now want to move into some of the services that we do provide to your communities, to businesses, to help meet the challenges that numbers like this present. And I will say it's not all doom and gloom. We have had some positive things going on in the state, so I want to touch on those for just a second as well. This slide shows our growing workforce. And again, South Dakota is really doing well in this category. So I just look at these numbers and think, oh my goodness, where would we be if we hadn't had this positive growth? So this shows that we are way above the national average for growth in our workforce numbers with that healthy 9.74% growth in our workforce numbers. You can see the United States workforce has only had 6.78% growth, and then a couple of our surrounding states, and at the bottom, what Illinois has shown for their growth. So again, this is a very good sign that we are growing our workforce in a positive direction. The other thing that South Dakota can really be proud of, and many of you possibly saw some of the information that came out recently on this, but we are the #1 state for inbound migration. And I think in our humble nature or our own estimation of South Dakota, this sometimes surprises us that people are moving here from all over the country. So what I want to point out on this slide are two really important numbers. People moved 60% of the time, they said, for a job. So the word is getting out that we have lots of opportunities and that we're a good state to seek employment in. And then secondly, family, 24%. The age demographics that you see represented, so 18 to 34-year-olds make up 30% of our inbound population growth, and 45 to 54-year-olds make up another 30%. So 60% of those moving to our state are really moving here in that perfect age demographic, because I can only assume that if you're between 18 to 34 or 45 to 54, that you're probably not coming here alone. You're probably bringing a spouse and most likely, hopefully, some children. So again, these are really positive numbers for our current workforce to see this growth and for our future workforce as well. So like I said, a couple highlights about some positive trends. I want to focus just for a second on some of the issues, and Governor Dugard has been very involved in workforce and continues to have conversations and to keep as one of his main platforms to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to address the workforce challenges in the state. And recently he's had some initiatives that he would like some input on. So if you can just think about these things as I walk through the rest of the slides and communicate with the department after the presentation if you have any thoughts on these questions that I'm going to pose to you. One of our #1 issues is students don't see school as relevant. And studies show that at about 5th grade is that peak time for students to be engaged in school. And maybe think about your own children or your own education. You know, in 5th grade, you still want to go to school. You're showing up excited. You like your teacher. You like learning. It's not just all about the social. And students are at their peak of their engagement in that 5th grade year. After that, however, that engagement continues to drop steadily. So by the time students are in their junior and senior year, they're much less engaged, and they're seeing what they're doing as being less and less relevant to their future and to their real lives. So how do we make educational experiences more relevant so they are prepared? And how can we get students to be more motivated? I think those are two really big challenges for us as a state and for us as parents and communities as we move forward. At that same time, we have that dichotomy that employers don't have enough qualified applicants for the jobs available. So while we're considering the students and their needs and their futures and the demands, how do we create a large enough pipeline for employers to meet their current and future workforce demands? So the simple solution, but then how do we prepare strategies to meet this is the big question. We need to give students opportunities to job-relevant skills that are in demand and offer those skills in South Dakota. So go back to, for a second, my comments earlier about the youth engagement in the workforce. As we see those youth engagement numbers decline, it causes more and more issues across the board for our workforce challenges. And I want you to, again, just think for a moment about your first employment experience and think about the types of skills you learned on your first job. So my first job was at the A&W in Belfouche, South Dakota. I was a car hop for 2 whole weeks and was promoted very quickly to cook, or fountain, if you know the lingo of the business. And I was frying French fries when I was 14, which, reflecting back on youth labor laws, I'm not really sure that that was correct, which, by the way, youth labor laws have been on the books since 1938, so I'm not old enough to predate youth labor laws. But we pay much more attention. Youth labor laws are, as they well should be, much more enforced today. So some opportunities maybe are not appropriate for kids. As I think about it, though, the things that I learned at the A&W have helped me my entire adult life and in my professional career. I learned to be a team player. I learned to work with difficult clients and difficult co-workers. I learned to have somebody cover my shift if I wasn't going to be able to show up on time and contact my supervisor. So a lot of times we refer to many of those things as soft skills. And again, a conversation that I have continually with employers is my new employees or employees today lack soft skills. And sometimes when I challenge employers, what do you mean by soft skills? I have a difficult time defining that, but it's something that we're all kind of aware is lacking. And so we define soft skills as appearance, attendance, attitude, ability to learn, ability to take directions, showing up on time. In today's world, cell phone etiquette, putting it away, putting it down, not accessing it at work, whatever the policies may be. So if you think about what I mentioned, that kids are not engaged in the workforce and that rate is declining all the time, it really illustrates why we see the disconnect sometimes that we do. A lot of kids now are not having their first job until they're 19, 20, and even 21 years old. So picture that you're an employer and you've just hired a young individual for an opening in your business, and they walk in at that age. Your expectations for the skills that they should have at that age are going to possibly be very different from the reality because they haven't had that first work experience. And so we almost have to reset and find a way, how do we deal with those older youth that don't have those skills and provide them so they can be successful in the workforce? But moving forward, how do we find ways that allow kids to be more engaged in the workforce and become productive members in the future? I'm a parent. I've probably contributed a lot, and some of you may identify with this or may know others that have. I've got 2 children. My first son, we said as parents, well, if you play hockey in the winter and you play baseball in the summer and you maintain good grades and you mow the lawn, you don't have to have a job. And that was a mistake. So as a parent, I always try to make new mistakes with my children and not repeat the old ones. So our second son has had a job in high school. But I think our kids are so busy today. They're so engaged. Sports used to have seasons, and now they're all year, and kids are taking college classes sooner, and all of those are positive things. But I think we can't underestimate, and now I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit, but I think it's really healthy and it's good for both businesses and kids if we can find ways to get them engaged, even if it's on a limited basis in our businesses, in our communities, while they're still in high school. So I think that's something that we can all work together as communities and educational partners in how do we do that. And it's also that pipeline. It's where you build those relationships with kids before they go off to post-secondary school. So I've put out some challenges. I've got on my soapbox there for a minute. And as we move forward, some of the things that we're doing then to address some of these issues. So this is a slide that I'm very proud of and I'm really excited about. This is our new SDWORKS system. So on April 3rd of this year, we launched this new system that is almost $1.5 million investment by the state and represents 2 years of IT work. What we had previously was a system that was cumbersome. If you had tried to post jobs with it, you were maybe less than satisfied with the process. If you were a job seeker, I won't use the language that my son used to describe it, but it was less than complimentary when he talked about our old system. And I think what you'll find now is a much better user experience, but it also provides just a wealth of information and data and tools beyond what our capabilities were before. So what this is, let's talk about for a second. Remember I said before, it is our monster specific to South Dakota. So this is where employers can go to post jobs and where job seekers can go to find a job. And this is actually the employer screen. Super easy to use, but if you have any issues, make sure you reach out to our local office staff as they can help you navigate this process and how to use this resource. Some highlights that I want to talk about, on the left-hand navigation where there's labor market services, you can access a wealth of data that is actually real-time data for the first time by checking that labor market services. For instance, yesterday I was giving a presentation similar to this in winter, and I wanted to know what the unemployment rate was in winter. I wanted to know what the average wages were, what their workforce was, what that ratio that I mentioned earlier was for the winter and surrounding communities, and I could just click on that labor market services link and I could find all that information easily within 2 minutes. I will tell you that before we had this system, a request like that was very cumbersome. We had one individual in Aberdeen, bless his heart. He's one of those people that can never take advantage of a vacation day or be sick. And if I had a request for labor market information, I would have to send him an email or call him. He would have to work with the Bureau of Information and Technology. They would have to figure out how to do a data query. And about 3 days later, I would have the answer to my question, which seems silly in today's world of electronics, but that was the reality with the system that we had previously. Well, now with the system that we have, that information is readily available to everyone, and it is real-time data. So if I were to look, it would tell me exactly how many jobs we have listed in South Dakota this morning. It would tell me what skills employers are looking for. It would tell me what skills job applicants have. Just a wealth of information. It would tell me average wages for an area, so I can look and see, are my wages competitive? Am I too high? Am I too low? What are other businesses in my community or the surrounding area or the state paying for a similar position? So again, so much information. I'm not going to go into a lot on the posting of jobs, but I will tell you that this is a fabulous new function, and I would actually recommend that we do a future webinar on just how to post a job in this system, because I think that our listeners would really benefit from that information. Some things that I do want to just touch on briefly, though. This whole system is based on skill sets rather than just job titles. So fairly easily, you can go in and you can customize your job orders for the exact skills that you're looking for. So in the past, maybe you were looking for a bookkeeper and you would go in and put in the description of what you wanted that bookkeeper to do. What this system does now is it will pop up lists of hundreds of different skills that a bookkeeper may have. And you can go through and check the ones that you need specifically for your bookkeeper. It will, maybe you need a bookkeeper that has a CDL license because you're a small business and that just makes sense for your structure. You would be able to add those requirements. So what you end up with is a job opening that really represents what you're looking for, much different from just bookkeeper. And in the past, it would have searched for people that said they were looking for a bookkeeper experience, and somebody would have had to put that title in as their desired occupation. To clarify that a little bit, on the flip side, if I'm a job seeker and I'm posting my resume or putting my profile into the system, that too is all done on skills. And so if I've worked at the A&W and I've been a school teacher and I've been a government employee, I have a lot of different skill sets from that experience that have nothing to do with my titles. So when I'm creating my personal profile as a seeker, I'm listing all my skills. And again, the system facilitates that by providing me prompts and lists, and I can check which ones apply to me. But then when the magic goes on behind the scenes and it's matching that employer's opening to individual skill sets, it's doing that based on the actual skills and not some arbitrary title that I've put in for what I thought I did in the past or what an employer thinks their position should be called. Recently, I visited with somebody after a presentation and they said, hey, just want to let you know your system's not working, which is not what you want to hear about a brand new system. And he mentioned that an individual in his community had been talking about the system, and it said they had a 25% match to be an engineer. And this individual had no engineering experience, was far from being an engineer. And my first reaction was, oh, that's unfortunate, that didn't work. But the more I thought about it, was no, the system actually worked perfectly. Because it's not saying that person had the licensure or the formal education to be an engineer or had ever been an engineer, but the skill sets that they had identified that they had, 25% of those matched the skill sets that an engineer would need to be successful on the job. So what that does when you're matching based on skills is it may open up an employer's eyes to a lot more applicants than they would have traditionally considered. And as a job seeker, it can open my eyes to opportunities that I never dreamt I was qualified for because of my limited experience and what types of positions I've had in the past. So a much better way to do that job matching. I said I wasn't going to talk about this too much, but I just get so excited about it, and I'm so thrilled about the capabilities that I do want to mention one other thing that I think is really important for employers. And this was a hard thing for labor to get to, but we had to let go of some control. In the past, most of the job orders were what we called suppressed, which meant Marcia, the job seeker, is sitting at home and she's looking for jobs and she sees this opening and it's perfect, it's just what she's looking for, it's in her community, and she'd click on how to apply and it would be a dead end. It would say, must contact local office at this number. Well, now our job orders are not suppressed unless an employer requests it. So if I'm seeking for a job at home in my jammies at night and that perfect job pops up, when I click on how to apply, it tells me how to apply. It will say contact Sweet Peas, Pierre, South Dakota between the hours of 8 and 5, ask for Fred, and here's the phone number. So it takes us out of that equation. It's a much more direct link. On the flip side, seeker information is also not suppressed unless you request it as a registrant. So you as an employer, rather than having to get a list from your local labor office of eligible or appropriate applicants, you can see that applicant information right there on your own computer screen. So if you want to know right now today how many people might be in your area that might have skill sets that match, you're going to see those individuals, you're going to see their contact information, their names, and their resumes. So again, it's a much more open system for both sides of the equation. Okay, I'm going to squelch my enthusiasm on this. Oh, I do want to talk about one other thing. Sorry, I'm not quite ready to move on. And that is, remember those job posting numbers that I talked about before, that we had 14,000 and some jobs available at any one time? Another great new feature of this system, and it's not totally there yet, we're working on it and have some bugs to work out, but this system has much better what we call job spidering or scraping capabilities. So every night this site goes out and scrapes or spiders Indeed and some of those really big job posting websites nationally, and it looks for any jobs that are posted in South Dakota, and then it actually does a deduplication, and there are like different levels of deduplication that I'm not even going to pretend to say I understand, so that it's weeding out jobs that we maybe already have listed in our system. So it does that on those big sites. It does it for corporate sites. I believe the parameters are set that it will do any business that has posted 10 or more jobs in the last year. And so what we're still working on is initially for our smaller businesses, there's a function that we as staff are going to have to go in with your request or your permission to enable it to go out to your own sites to be able to do that same thing for smaller businesses. So again, we've only had this website up and running for a couple months. We've already seen huge increases in our job posting numbers, and then we'll continue to be able to increase the capabilities to spider or scrape jobs as we move forward for the smaller businesses in our state. And that just means, again, less work for employers. If you've already posted at one place, you know, why should you have to post at another place and duplicate those efforts? So very excited about that capability, and you'll be hearing more about that. The other thing, if you're from a community, and we've had a lot of communities over the years create their own job search tools or their own web presence, and strongly encourage communities not to do that. We have a wealth of information. We can customize a page for Mitchell, and it would on the front be designed to look whatever Mitchell wants, but then behind the scenes it would link to our site, and it could list just jobs in that community or that zip code or that county, and have this really robust, sophisticated system behind the scenes promoting their jobs and still giving them that local flair. So that's, again, just something I'd like to encourage communities to think about. Maybe they could utilize their resources in other ways and let this be the mechanism behind the scenes to help promote their jobs. One thing that I want to talk about just briefly is an ongoing effort that we have had, and it's Dakota Roots. And again, we have a lot of services in the state for our job seekers to help them improve their skills, but this is one of our out-of-state recruitment efforts. We've actually been doing this for almost 10 years, or a little bit over. In that time, we've had almost 30,000 out-of-state individuals register with Dakota Roots. We've had 4,711 individuals return to the state for a job. And that may not sound like a lot over 10 years, but it's more than one person per day if you do the math. The average age of those individuals is 34, which again to me is very exciting because that means they're kind of in that family, spouse, kids age group. And currently today we still have 1,795 individuals. So Dakota Roots is our grassroots effort. It's our marketing to people that know something about South Dakota. They have family here, they've lived here, they know about the state. We don't have to sell them on the state because they know what it's all about. So in this instance, we facilitate that job match. And then we also have a new program that we're working with GOED on that is a much more targeted engagement and capture process for individuals. So they're really targeting 18 to 35-year-olds outside of South Dakota, blue and gray collar, single or married without children, males, to meet some of the high demand occupations that we have right now in South Dakota. So GOED is the marketing part of that. They're doing the research and have the resources to market to individuals, and then they're directing them to our website, and we actually have staff teamed up, are trained, and they are selling South Dakota and the jobs we have to the individuals that come through this website. So again, to really active partnerships, a little bit different focus for those that know something about South Dakota, recruit them, and then this brand new program in partnership with economic development that is only about 4 weeks old and is more targeted and more intensive services for those job seekers that are coming to the state. This slide violates every rule possible of PowerPoint presentations, but what it does is it shows you the many things that we can do to help workers. We have funding that we can send people to training. We can do career counseling and help people navigate what's the best path to reach an occupation. You're going to hear a lot more about apprenticeships in South Dakota, really a push to increase our number of apprenticeships that we have available. And the last one on here I'm going to talk about on the next slide is soft skills training, which is a new curriculum that we have. So again, this is just to give you a flavor of the many different things that we have to help individuals obtain the skills that employers are looking for. In that realm, again, much will be heard. I think there's going to be a big push statewide for apprenticeships. We currently only have 686 registered apprentices in the state, which is a really low number, and only 4 of those are women. So we're really going to be working to increase those numbers of opportunities because, again, remember how kids aren't engaged in the workforce? This is a really great way to help them learn and earn and gain certification in the process. The soft skills curriculum is another thing I want to touch on briefly. This is a curriculum that the Department of Labor has purchased, and employers can send brand new employees to this so they can have a quick educational setting where they're learning those soft skills that they maybe haven't learned because they didn't have that first job earlier, or they didn't pay attention on their first job. And it's also available for just individuals before they go into the workforce. And so we're going to be working closely with with schools, so we can incorporate some of the soft skills curriculum into the schools as well. So we have youth that are better prepared when they do enter the workforce. And the last thing is that we do have training dollars available and have had for many years for youth, adults, and dislocated workers. And these training dollars, we can help offset wages for somebody in a work experience. We can set up and help people go to post-secondary education at a technical school. We can provide supportive services while they're in training or looking for employment, like tools or appropriate clothing, or even transportation while they're trying to get to work. So no shortage on the supports that we can help give to workers. This slide is where you can find our local offices, and the stars are where we have comprehensive services, and the circles are where we have smaller staff that have a presence full-time. And then there's a whole lot of small communities across the state where you don't see any markings, but we provide services in communities large and small on a regular basis, on a daily basis throughout the state. For instance, our Spearfish office covers Leiden, Deadwood, and Sturgis, and Belle Fourche, clear on up to Buffalo, and they're providing services on a daily basis in a scheduled manner, as other communities throughout the state are covered in the same way. And the different shading on the slide shows the counties that are served by those particular offices. So with that, years ago, the Fed spent, I think, $1 million on marketing our local offices as job service offices, and we have not called ourselves job service for probably 10 or 15 years, and yet that's how the public still sees us. We've been one-stop career centers, we've been the one-stop, we've been a career center, we've been local DLR offices, and I'm just kind of the philosophy, you know what, if you can't beat them, join them. So we've started to sneak the term job service back into what we call ourselves, and we'll, moving forward, reference our local Department of Labor and Regulation offices as job service, because that really summarizes what they do and the services that they provide. So I've gone through a lot of information, and the time has gone very quickly, but I would just encourage you, if you have follow-up questions or information that you would like in addition to what I've shared with you today, please don't hesitate to contact one of your local offices for additional information. With that, we know we don't have all the solutions. Any one of the topics that I've touched on today, I could probably do a complete session if Sean would ever wish to invite me back. Maybe he'll say no way. But we need your thoughts, suggestions, and feedback. So have provided on the screen my public communications individual, Don Dovry, who would welcome comments or thoughts from you. And at this time, I'm going to see if there are a few questions that Katie may have from our listeners.
Thank you very much, Secretary Hultman. So we are going to open it up for questions now. Again, to ask a question, go to the panel on the side of your screen, and you may need to click on that orange arrow to maximize the panel. Type your message in the chat box and click on send. We have received a few questions, so I will read those now, but you can continue to ask questions throughout this. Our first one is, do you have a breakdown of females versus males in the workforce that have multiple jobs? That went back to kind of the beginning of the presentation, I think.
I would be able to get that. If I don't, I'm looking through my notes to see if I have that specific. And I know, looking at that a different way, I was just looking at children who had both parents in the workforce, and that number was very high. So Katie, I'm not going to have that exact number for you, but we would gladly get that as a follow-up and can post it.
Okay, perfect. And I think you touched on this, but when the, going back to the job scraping, so when will that job scraping and or the XML feeds be available so our job postings get updated in real time?
And again, thank you for asking that. To restate that, it is going on right now. If you're a smaller business or your jobs have not been being picked up by that, please just reach out to your local office and we can activate that account. So we have the authorization to go out to your website and to do that.
Okay, great. As a new director and in the process of hiring a new secretary, what advice could you give to make it a successful process?
For me personally in that process, just approach it with an organized list of questions that you really think will be helpful for your position. I always find it's a good starting point for the interview process to go out and look just for standard questions, but then really customize that to your business philosophy, to the atmosphere of your business. And this is not an exact science at all, but I really try to consider personality and how personalities are going to fit with the rest of the team. I would really encourage you to use our tool that I've mentioned, SDWORKS, as a way to maybe look for those skill sets and really help you define what skills you're looking for. Again, for me, that's sometimes a challenge that I haven't even really thought about what I need that position to do and the vast array of different responsibilities that the individual will have. So SDWORKS can help you frame that position description as well. So you're maybe looking for and asking the right questions and seeking out the skills that really will benefit. So I hope there's a little bit of helpful information in that suggestion.
Yes, absolutely. Next, could you touch on the result or how the results from the new website will be measured, what metrics will be used, and how information will be shared?
I thought a lot about that question because you had shared it with me prior to this morning's presentation. And this website really is all about data, all about sharing. And so it's just built into the very being of the system. The data is all available to the public. Like I said, there are so many different things that we can measure. We can measure wages. We can measure workforce participation. We can measure what skills employers are looking for. And so those are all capabilities within the system, and those measurements are available to the public. From our perspective, more as an agency, we can also analyze how many individuals are visiting the site on a daily basis, how many of them are actually spending some time on the site. You know, you hear a lot about Google Analytics and click time and click-through rates, and we'll just have a wealth of data that will help us know, is our system accessible? Are people finding the information they're looking for? Are people utilizing all the capabilities of the system? So with today's technology, we'll just have so much more information, and I think it'll help us improve our services moving forward. So, and we do an annual report each year that is available on our website, and we supply to the public. So I think a lot of that data about how the system is working will be incorporated in our annual report and will be available there.
Perfect. Next question. So in regards to the slide about South Dakota being the #1 state for inbound migration, I think it was slide 4, do we know if these were former South Dakota residents, or were people coming into South Dakota who have never lived here before?
That I'm not able to tell you because there's no way, we've not surveyed or tracked them in any manner, so there really isn't a way to demonstrate, if they would be kind of what I would consider a Dakota Roots or if they're brand new to the state.
Sure. Okay. When you were talking about how local communities can work with the South Dakota Department of Labor instead of setting up their own local job services projects, is there a specific office that should be contacted at the state level?
No, to initiate that conversation, I would say start with your local office. If you look back at that map and the communities or the counties that are served by each area, so you could call up the peer office and talk to the manager there, and they're probably going to connect you with Dawn. Actually, I'm going to backtrack and scratch all that. In that instance, Katie, it probably would be best if individuals just contacted Dawn or a community contacted Dawn and said, we're interested in having a Belle Fourche specific page, and then we could work forward from there.
Okay, great. Regarding the workforce training programs and funds, is there a list available online of types of training programs and funding that employers can check to see if there's anything that would work for them?
There is, and in the slides, those are all links to the actual web page, but if you go to SDJobs.org, that's our homepage, and it too has been recently designed, so I think it's easier to navigate, but there are links to all the different training programs and the services provided. And again, if you look at that and have any questions or are a little overwhelmed by it, you know, just reach out to staff in one of our local offices and they can talk you through those things. Okay. We are federally funded, so all of those training programs are provided through federal funds.
Okay, one more time, what was the website? Or is it on that?
SDJobs.org.
Okay.
We should add that to our last slide.
Okay, so can you share any website data, for example, the number of people going to the SDWORKS site, data on the number of people searching for the jobs in specific communities, demographic information on people using SDWORKS?
Again, yes, that's all information that we capture. I don't have those statistics in front of me. I'm trying to think how many registered job seekers we have right now. I think our registered job seeker numbers is in the range of 26,000 at any one time. But again, we're more than happy to get those exact numbers and provide it as follow-up.
Okay, so that's not on the website. That would have to be information that you provide.
No, actually, and I was just thinking I could probably go find it, but I don't want to play around in my computer and mess up the whole presentation. But on that labor market information link on the left-hand side of the navigation on SDWORKS, much of that would be accessible to the public as well.
Okay, I think we just have one more, it looks like. We have a question from a business that has been working with their local job services for nearly a year with no success, and they indicate they have more success on other job sites. Their question is, how are you addressing this reality or the reality of this issue?
And I guess I would have to have more information before I would be able to answer that. And I'm not sure if that is still holding true for that particular business in the last 2 months since we've made the improvements to the system. But I would be happy to visit with them if they want to just give me a call or reach out to Dawn. If either way, she can connect them with me. So yeah, I would like to know more about their experience and see what we can maybe do to improve that.
Okay, perfect. I think, do you have any remarks, any last questions or comments that you can think of? I don't have any more from our attendees.
No, again, I just really thank your organization for this opportunity, and hopefully there's been a little bit throughout the presentation that will encourage people to look more at our services, to engage with our new website. And with our new website, like anything new, if you encounter a frustration or something's not working the way you think it should, reach out to our staff. It's new to all of us. It's kind of like going from a flip phone to an iPhone, and part of that is a smooth, intuitive transition, and part of it is just learning the capabilities of the new system. So bear with us. We're in our infancy with the new system.
Okay. Well, I think we have one more question that came in. Can employers work with DOL and the GOED to target specific areas of the country to seek applicants for jobs they are recruiting for?
Yes, GOED has been working really hard to reach out to communities, because communities have a very large role in that new project and what their unique demands are for their businesses in that community. So we can target, if we know there's high rates of unemployment for individuals with a specific skill set in another state, we can target marketing there. And Mary LaHecka Nelson has been our contact in GOED. She's the one that we're working very closely with, and she's the community contact. So I would encourage businesses to reach out to Mary. And again, if you don't have contact information, just email us and we'll connect you with her.
Okay, and
so,
just for everyone's benefit, GOED is the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and Mary's last name again was?
It's LaHecka Nelson.
Okay.
And
so,
don't ask to spell it.
That's okay. They can just contact your office or Dawn to get that information if needed.
Yeah, I could give you her direct phone number, but she might not appreciate me for doing that. So, as in Mary's. So, yeah, if you can't get the contact information for economic development, please, again, just reach out to us and we can facilitate that.
Okay, perfect. So I think that's all the questions that we have. Again, we'd like to thank you, Secretary, for today's presentation. And just a couple things before we jump off the call here. The webinar has been recorded, and a link to this recording will be emailed to you later today. The another announcement we'd like to let you know about is an educational opportunity on labor issues. In September, SCRA will sponsor a labor law conference, actually 3 of them, one in Watertown, Sioux Falls, and Rapid City. At those workshops, employment law attorney Chris Hoyme of the Jackson Lewis Law Firm will focus on employer rights and responsibilities. In addition, we'll have cybersecurity experts who will explain the data security risks faced by businesses of all sizes and what steps you should take to reduce your risk. So you can check out our website, www.sdra.org, for more details. And on our website, we'll also include a link to the webinar recording from today. I want to thank everyone for participating in today's program.